Thank you for joining us, staying with us on the program. We appreciate it. Let's just jump straight to our next discussion on the program, which focuses on public finance. Over time, people have vigorously expressed their displeasure. In some points, at some points, they've actually expressed utter disappointment in how public finances are expended, especially when it has to do with the so-called recurrent expenditure. One of the things they complain about is the absence, or what they consider the absence of transparency as to how expenditure is recorded, or how finances, public finances that is, are deployed, particularly regarding how public officers, those appointed in this case, use public money, or what we now call taxpayers' money, to fund whatever it is they do on a day-to-day basis. But here's the punch of this whole conversation. Just a few days ago, the Honorable Minister of Finance has told Nigerians that so much has been realized just by putting the search lamp on certain areas where so much attention had not been paid before now. To say, look, let's see how much we spend on XYZ and do a review and see how we can cut costs significantly in such a way that we can have more money to put elsewhere, particularly in other areas where these monies are so badly or desperately needed. To discuss all of these issues and make sense of them, I'm joined by two gentlemen again, but this time a lawyer, Barrister Abraham Oviawe, civil rights activist. We appreciate your presence on the program.
Thank you very much, and good morning.
Thank you for coming. And then, of course, I have a gentleman next to him dressed in white attire. So good to have you on the program again today. Engineer Elvis Obaseki is a businessman and a public affairs commentator. Let's jump right to the chase, gentlemen. Let me begin with you, Oviawe. I've seen you talk both at rallies and, of course, on television. You've talked about your concern for how our finances, or overall our resources, are used by those who hold offices in this country. With this revelation by the Honorable Minister of Finance, what exactly is the message we should be taking away?
Let me say very strongly that the cross of our consistent agitations that government must show some level of accountability and decency in spending is arising from the fact that rather than putting the people in perspective in the course of democratic activities or in the course of governance, they put their selfish interest and self-aggrandizement at the front burner. So the cross of our consistent agitation and engagement of officers of government or government officials, as it were, is on the basis that whatever they do on a daily basis, because if you are there at the base of the people who elected you, or by their mandate you were appointed by an elected officer, it presupposes that whatever you do must be to the overall benefit of the people. But when you derogate or derail from this very concept, we are at liberty to go to Mount Olympus to demand that you are not in line. Therefore, what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is that accountability, style of spending. You see, the pain is that these funds are not for you. They are taxpayers some more money. You only hold them in trust for the people. But when you spend this money in the most reckless manner, the implications are the people are going to suffer for it. Like you rightly mentioned, I expect that government must be very prudent, or knowing fully well that if money in question isn't for them, it must translate to the overall benefit of the people. It must trickle down from the ranks to that very lowest individual. It may not be by way of sharing it directly. The people must benefit from it by way of the dividends, which may include pipeline water, good road, which may include stability in our economy. But when you decide to emasculate our commonwealth, patrimony, for your own selfish interest, involving in bogus spending, involving in high lives at the detriment of the people, the implication that the people are going to suffer for it. And consistently, we will engage you, we will continue to condemn it in its roots, stem, and branches. The society must be a better place for us. Those who are given power of authority or position of authority by the people, they must ensure that the funds, the finances of the people must be prudently utilized, judiciously, and for the very overall good of the people.
Well, from all of this, the minister has said, is it a way of saying there's light at the end of the tunnel? Because until now, we are not used to hearing stories like this.
Just to say that if I am to address that issue from the perspective of what ought to be. I would say very clearly that if whatever the minister is saying is anything to go by, because this current administration of wherefore the minister is speaking from have involved in reckless spending. I can go on and on. If they say they have saved, let me also tell you that 3 weeks ago, I was flying from Lagos to Abuja, and a minister was on board on first class, not just him. His aides were also there. We see people of government on a daily basis, unless she is trying to say that such trip which I saw a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria was a private trip. If there's a policy of government that by way of cutting costs, those who are holding positions of behalf of the people must fly economy to enable us cut costs. And suddenly the minister has just said it. I am saying 2 weeks ago from Abuja to Lagos, I saw a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria flying in first class in an aircraft which I was part of. It means therefore that story in itself is a lie, unless she is willing to, she's able to convince us that indeed that was a private trip.
We cannot categorically say it's a lie, because as you already suggested, there's a possibility that the minister paid from his pockets. Of course, he has the right to fly first class. He has the right to charter a flight if he can afford it. But again, you have mentioned something that's incisive. He talked about policy a while ago. I think that's one area of concern for most Nigerians who follow this trend on a daily basis. Because they say, hey, is it not possible for us to have a structure, in his words, like a policy kind of arrangement where you say no minister, no appointed official flies first class or flies business class. It has to be economy class, because a lot of persons have come to say we are very random about the things we do in this country, where a minister can just decide to charter a chopper for no just cause, just because that's what his hunch tells him to do. Is it not possible to have a system where there's a structure, where things run on autopilot, where you know there are limits you just can't overstep?
There is a serious problem with how it ought to be.
That's the ideal.
Yes, how it ought to be and how it is. A few days ago, we saw on social media when the Italian Prime Minister or the President went to report, to submit his letter of acceptance to report for. He came on a taxi. I've been out of this country many times, and I see the way public officers carry themselves on taxpayers' money. In Nigeria, the rules are set, but those that are supposed to implement the rules, they vary the rules when it comes to them. I want to take our president for an example. I remember at the beginning of this current administration, some 3 years ago, the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria made it look as if it's an abomination or a taboo for anybody to be treated outside this country, whether a hierarchy officer or the lowest of the society. But I can tell you, about 6-7 times now, our president has been out, even to keep a 24-hour appointment with a doctor in the UK. We now have what we call medical tourism. We've had our presidential jet parked in a UK airport for almost 90 days. There is a parking fee for aircrafts anywhere in the world. It cannot be waived. That is on one hand. We've had the president even block the payment of school fees via dollars to children abroad. I saw what Premium Times released some weeks back. All the president's children were trained in Ivy League schools abroad. So what are we talking about? So you cannot set a rule. You apply the rule by words, and in action, something else is what we have.
But let's quickly address something. You're going to continue with that narrative. But quickly, when you talk about the fact that the president had blocked, allegedly blocked payments of tuition to children, Nigerian schooling abroad, that can be true, because I know what had happened at that time was the CBN had a policy in place because there was so much of pressure on the dollar. The demand had gone right through the roof, and the CBN said what was going to happen was, if Engineer Obaseki needs to pay tuition for his daughter's schooling in the US, for instance, what he would have to do is go to the bank, buy Forex over the counter. However, the bank would have to wire the money straight to the school's account, as against where Engineer Obaseki picks it by hand, and then there's the likelihood he's going to go back to the Aboki Guard area, for instance, and sell it, and then he begins to do what they call round tripping. I think that was what it was at the time, because we understand that at that point in time, the CBN became more active with regards to regulating, as it were, the foreign exchange market. We just wanted to put that in perspective, so it doesn't look like the president gave or made.
Do you know the problems Nigerians faced abroad over that policy? Because sometimes we come up with policies without looking. Before you get into a construction, you have to do an AI, the environmental impact analysis.
Right.
Before you take you make policies or implement policies, you first of all look at what will be the impact. Negatively first. Negatively should count first before the positive angle. Negatively, and if the negative side outweighs the positive, then that policy it will be anti-people. We are in a country, if we have to go to the angle of data, the data and statistics in this country are concocted to the convenience of the government in power. Whatever Kemi Adeosun said, to a very large extent, I, Elvis Obaseki, will want to look at it from another angle. How true is that data?
Is it not possible that's the much of information she has at her disposal?
I tell you, I said in Nigeria, data and statistics are concocted to the convenience of the government in power.
And that's a problem.
It's a serious problem. That's why I would rather rely on data from established international bodies or some established independent bodies in Nigeria who has nothing to lose by putting, like World Transparency Monitoring Group or Transparency International or the Amnesty International will put it before me. I would rather go with such data than data from any arm of government. Because we concoct data just to the convenience. We are in an electoral year. We are stepping into 2019 is around the corner. When I saw what was on the paper that $288 billion naira has been saved over 10 years, 68 billion naira has been saved over the last 12 months, my dear, the easiest parameter to judge where the savings come from or the effect of these savings is how much has it affected the life of the poor man on the street. Precisely. Because I know up until tomorrow, the Nigerian political office holder will not sit in an economy class. They might give you the impression that they are paying or somebody is paying on their behalf. But if you must lead and you have not alienated yourself from the people, then you become a ruler. Leaders are followers, are passionate about their ideals, while rulers coerce people to believe in whatever or to follow whatever they have to do. In Nigeria, we have rulers. Whatever the Minister of Finance has said, I, sitting here, I don't believe that these figures are true.
You made mention or you made an allusion to the fact that you don't trust information when it comes from somebody like the minister, for example. You would rather trust information from maybe internationally recognized agencies.
Independent groups.
Groups. Now, along that line, you realize that recently, even KPMG, an internationally recognized accounting firm, had been mandated or engaged by the NEC, that's the National Economic Council, to probe certain amounts, up to 8 trillion, that had not been remitted, to look at what exactly had happened, all of the circumstances surrounding that money. Is that saying we cannot trust our own agencies, our own institutions? We have to go outside, we have to outsource all of these audits tasks, as it were?
KPMG has a very rich reputation.
Obviously.
And their integrity, they will not trade for any government in power. Whatever KPMG will put on the table, I will tell you that could be very close to being true. Whatever they put on the table, because they, first of all, being an internationally certified audit firm, they will first of all think of their integrity and the reputation they built over years than what the government in power will want to hear from them. Whatever KPMG has put on the table, I will tell you, could be true. I looked at the statistics of what we have. We have a system where there is so much wastages. You're talking of saving about 288 billion naira. I looked at what is the workforce. About 511 MDAs are in this country, with less than 1 million personnel. I saw 708,666 persons already captured in the IPPIS. And you're talking of billions of naira. 708,000 is less than 0.1% of the Nigerian population. So from the very top, it is not about reeling out figures of savings. It's about looking critically at the fiscal structure of this country. If less than 1 million attracts so much, then there is a problem. And these are persons that will still go on international trips. We make so much noise about international trips. There are some local trips that have even been paid at huge losses to the Nigerian system. A man having to go for a course from Monday to Wednesday, and he wants to be paid from Saturday to Friday.
Even when the course doesn't stretch for those.
It does not. And somebody will sign it. So if you really have to look at it, the fiscal system has to be looked at critically. Why don't we look for ways to reduce the cost of governance? It is not only in the political angle. The civil service system in the country, designed after the British system, but the British never saw what we have now. It's overplotted, and not just overplotted, we put too much funds into that area.
We're going to talk about reforms in the civil service in a bit, but quickly, let's look at what some persons have termed our culture of waste. It's not just for those in government, whether they are elected or appointed, but it has become like a Nigerian thing where we are so accustomed to wasting resources, we don't maximize resources. What do we do to deal with that reality in front of us?
You see, the part of the challenges we have in this country is that most people see opportunity to save as an employment.
So there's a difference, obviously.
Yes, they see an opportunity to serve the people as a way of making a living. When you are appointed to serve the people, maybe for example as Commissioner for Education, you quickly see that automatically means you are a contractor to build all the schools, to ensure you involve in purchase and supplies. You see that as an opportunity to enrich your immediate community. And the Nigerian factor, our value system, and I feel very strongly, and when you get there, the society, the entire structure of our political system and governance attach so much importance to this office, to the extent that, when I mean financial importance now, when I say importance, I mean financial importance. They feel as a commissioner, you are entitled to so much. Ordinarily, what you are entitled to is huge compared to when you now corruptly want to bend the system to suit your whims and caprices. Just to say very strongly that until we look beyond political office as an employment and see from the perspective of political office as a call to service, we are on a short path towards retrogression. And I feel very strongly that the story has not changed. Whether people had cried heavily to say there is change, the story has not changed at all, because the anchor point in all this is the Minister for Finance's postulations that they have saved a lot. And I feel that it amounts to enough if what you have saved does not translate either by allowing capital expenditure to go to that very purpose for which it was budgeted and have been appropriated for. I feel very strongly that the people have reached the highest level of suffering in the last 3 years. And as such, if you have saved hundreds of billions of naira, it amounts to nothing to the benefit of the people. If the people cannot guarantee themselves of 2 square meals, people even struggle to have one as we speak. The economy is nosediving. Our people can no longer compete credibly with others. And as I speak to you, the laws in this country are now made for a few. If you are from the south or you are from the north, benefits are accrued to more persons than others. Individuals, we are not like in an animal farm. Some persons are not more equal than the other. Those who advocated that change must come in a society where equality must be the basis upon which we shall thrive have suddenly changed the narrative. Those things Nigerians saw and wrestled with the past administration in 2015 are trickling back. We are now regretting why we ever allowed ourselves to toll that way in 2015. And let me even tell you, those indices, those postulations, those prophecies that emanated from 2015, they are more threatening and worse at this time. It is not for the minister to tell us that they are saving. How have you, in any event, section 414, section 2B says the security and welfare of the people is the primary purpose of governance. And government have failed in these two perspectives. Our people are now insecure. In the last 3 years, we have seen the worst and callous killing of Nigerians. Is it in Benue? Is it in Edo like you have seen in Odigwetua? Is it in Taraba? You go to Kogi, the story is same. You go to Kaduna, the story is same. You go to the north, you go to the west. You even go to Edo. Only 2 days ago, we heard about the callous axing and macheting of our people far back in Isako East. The story in respect to security is same. Government have paid lip services to it. Only a section of this country have now been saddled with responsibility of determining the security architecture of this nation. They have paid lip service to it. They have resulted in protecting their people rather than protecting Nigerians. They have seen it as a cabal for one part of this country rather than seeing it as unity of purpose of this country. The welfare is no longer there.
Now let's look at another important strand to this whole conversation. Institutions. A lot of persons have said that institutions are weak in this country. In fact, they've confidently posited that until we deal with redefining what an institution is, we can't get it right, because it will appear sometimes there's so much of emphasis tilted in favor of saying the man who holds the office needs to change. Some other persons have a contrary opinion. They say you've got to find a way to turn the institution around first. So when the man comes, he has no choice than to fit into the institution. So if we have weak institutions, if we have, as it stands right now, in most cases, dysfunctional institutions, how do we fix the man who runs this institution?
Let me also tell you very strongly that before 2015, for the emergence of this current administration, Nigerians have gone to Matolipos to cry to the high heavens that rather than building institutions, we have built individuals. Nigeria has been very strong. We are taught that with the way this current administration rode into power, we are expected that rather than empower individuals, would have empowered institutions. And let me also tell you, individuals determine the fate of institutions. When we have found ourselves in a system in the past years, when our institution has been determined by individual, we expect that we want to have graduated to a system where we will now build strong institutions. Let me tell you, this current administration has no regard for institutions. Let me take the anti-graft agencies for example. In recent time, we have seen the hue and cry about the man at the helms of affair of the EFCC. And painfully, the DSS, another agency of government, wrote a damning petition against the chairman of the EFCC. As we speak to you now, the president have chosen to see him as an acting chairman. Despite when Senate have rejected him. It doesn't matter if we say the senators are corrupt, but there are issues from another agency of government who Nigerians have deep respect for, now the DSS and the secret police. They have said this man in the EFCC is corrupt. Rather than remove him, we have seen problems. We have seen a system where a man who was indicted. The difficulty we have is that Nigerians have this culture of nepotism. It's across board. If a man from the south becomes president, he wants to look towards how he can empower his people. He sacrificed competence on the altar of sentiment. He put injustice. He's not concerned whether any part of the country is suffering terribly as long as his kinsmen are at the height. If Nigeria must move forward, we must build strong institutions. It doesn't matter who becomes president. The system will run like an autopilot. Let me tell you very strongly, my brother, that if Nigerians did not reverse, did not engage the reverse gear towards a direction where we build strong institutions, we'll still have a president who will come and eclipse both the judiciary and the legislature. We'll have a president who will come and determine, as I speak to you today, do you know that before any petition is being investigated, the Attorney General by the EFCC, the Attorney General must determine and approve? That is sad. I expect such an anti-graft agencies. And only yesterday Nigerians are happy.
Is that not constitutional?
Let me also tell you, how do you say, when was EFCC created? In 2002 here. It's an act, but again it has become an administrative arrangement where before you investigate anybody, the Attorney General who have the prosecutorial powers will look at it and say, proceed on this. What that suggests is, particularly when the appointment of the Attorney General is at the pleasure of the President, it means, therefore, it's whoever they determine to investigate that will be investigated. Only yesterday, the social media was awash of the conviction of the former Taraba State governor for 3 years. And people have suddenly ran to town to say that this government is fighting anti-corruption. But they have demoted themselves from appreciating the fact that the trial that have resulted in that conviction started far back in 2007. And as such, you want to tell me that because in the last 3 years, these have not been in power, they have not been the one that have changed the trial. If indeed in the last few years, when the prosecution was ongoing, these people let me so tell you very strongly that more corrupt officers were dealt with in previous administration than we have today. What we have seen is the height of nepotism. Why have the Secretary of the Government of the Federation not been tried to date? Maina was driven from the service. He was not only returned back, he was promoted. Let me tell you the pain. The pain is not that he was returned back and the president couldn't backtrack. The pain is that when the Senate chose to investigate the problem, the Attorney General of the Federation filed an action in court restraining the Senate from investigating Maina. And I now ask, what is the correlation? Don't forget that this same AG had given the Secretary to the Government of the Federation a clean bill until the panel headed by the Vice President investigated the matter and copiously indicted him, upon which he was removed. Today, he has not been tried, he has not been charged. What we have seen is media trial.
Of course, there have been.
And you think our country can propose it?
There have been agitations from several quarters that there should be prosecution of these officers you mentioned a while ago. But let's talk about reforms in the civil service, for example. Most people say we can't play the ostrich over what they have come to see as the inefficiency of the civil service in this country. In fact, they've talked about things like bureaucracy, red tapeism, and so on and so forth. What makes it so cumbersome, or in some cases, as some persons have come to see or believe, impossible to reform the civil service in such a way that it can, to a large extent, compete with the private sector?
I think the problem is endemic.
We know what ought to be, but we don't have the capacity to make it happen. I think beyond just adumbrating consistently on shows of this magnitude, we must take very proactive steps to go to Mount Olympus, to engage, to organize, to mobilize and ensure that we recoordinate and retool the affairs of this country with quality and strong leadership, vibrant and cerebral youth who will determine the fate of this country. The old have tried their best. It is time for them to just give a way out, to allow those who are within this age bracket, still very vibrant, to retool and take their own part in determining the building of this our dear country called Nigeria.
Let's talk about election. I mean, general election is upon us now, just a few months away. Some persons have come to believe that election itself has a way of putting pressure on politicians, whether they are in office at the moment or they have ambition to go to hold political offices. Because at some point what it does for them is to put that pressure on them to misappropriate public funds towards ensuring that they have enough resources to be able to facilitate campaign and other projects in between. How do we also begin to address that issue? Because there will always be election. In Nigeria, it's a 4-year cycle. The next general election is just a few months away, and then we're hearing different things about public finance and so on and so forth. Beyond just the figures, beyond just bringing out figures because you want to impress, because you want to create a certain impression in such a way that Nigerians begin to think in a certain direction, how do we begin to ensure that Nigerians, taxpayers in this country, get their money's worth?
Primarily, I think I want to go back to a Nostradamus position that Goodluck Jonathan had some years ago when he suggested the one tenure thing of 6 or 7 years for executive positions. We found out in this country that in 4 years that a man is in office, governance is only the second and the third year. The first year in office is settling down. The fourth year is preparing for another election. So you end up having a vicious circle of every 4 years, so much wastages. Because I can tell you that if we had inflation before now, if we didn't have enough money in circulation before now, from now up until the election of February 2019, there will be so much money. There will be so much liquidity that even the CBN cannot control. Because our political system has been so monetized. You will be surprised that for the first time in Nigerian budget that has underperformed in the last 2 or 3 years because of releases. The releases of this 2018 will far outweigh our class 2016 and 2017 because we are in an electoral year. Capital projects that were not visited in 2016 and 2017, releases will be made for it in 2018 because we need to have more money in the system to execute the election for 2019. It's unfortunate, and unfortunately also for us, we have a cash-based economy. You cannot tell me in the United States of America that you move $50 million from an account to the other and it will not flag. But in this country, you can bring out 500 million naira from across the counter and nobody will ask you questions.
But CBN has also created thresholds across platforms for transactions.
I will tell you, laws will make laws in Nigeria under normal circumstances that would have been applied, but those that are supposed to implement it will look for shortcuts.
So going forward, what will we do? 30 seconds.
Way forward. I think we need a complete social re-engineering.
Okay.
A complete social re-engineering. We must begin to see Nigeria as our project, not mine.
Barrister Yahweh.
We need a leadership that will put politics aside and be concerned about the pains and drain of the people. And like I tell you, and like I'm used to saying, that those who rode on the base of propaganda will not have it to utilize at this time, and those who think they can cover the sun with their palm will soon find the heat very unbearable. The people will speak at the appropriate time, and as such, we will be there to offer quality leadership to determine the future of this country, where our children will ask us what were our role in determining we retool this country. No matter how small, we must play it so that we can be recorded in history.
Okay, I think that's a punch for the discussion. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on the program. Of Yahweh Abraham Esquire, thank you for coming. Engineer Elvis Obasaki, thank you for coming as well. We appreciate it. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.